everyone. Thanks for joining. This morning I'm going to be chatting to Leah Thomas, whose Instagram handle is Green Girl Leah. I see her popping up here. And we're going to be talking about lots of things, about environmentalism, the intersection between the climate crisis and social justice, and her new platform, Intersectional Environmentalist. So let me just now. Should be coming on. Thank you so much for joining wherever you're all coming from.
Oh my gosh!
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. It's bright and early.
I know.
Yeah, where are you?
I'm in LA, so I'm on the same time zone as you.
Yeah, we're like super close.
Yeah. I'm pleased I was able, I'll save it and obviously share it for everyone afterwards, but I'm sure everyone's joining from all over the world. I'm sure people can share where they're coming from, in fact, or where they're joining from. It's always fun to see where everyone's from.
I didn't realize you were in LA and just like up the highway. That's awesome.
Yeah, literally. Where are you in California?
I just moved to Ventura, but I'm in like the Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, California.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love it up there. I sometimes go surfing up there.
Oh, ooh, you surf.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll turn the volume up a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Can everyone, I'll just check, hopefully everyone can hear us. I guess they'll let us know if they can't. So thank you for joining. For everyone who doesn't know, I'm Bonnie and this is Leah Thomas. I guess I was following you I was trying to figure out how I actually found your profile. I can't remember how or why. I think it was through, there's like Instagram rabbit holes we can go down. But it's been just really amazing to see, obviously, the new platform that you've started during this time, Intersectional Environmentalist. So would you like to give us a little bit of a brief overview of like what that is and like what led you to begin that platform? And maybe like it'll also be cool to hear a bit about sort of your education in this space too before.
Yeah, something that's kind of funny is we started following each other and I was like, wow, she is just such an incredible environmental activist and filmmaker. And it took, sorry. Okay, pause. But it took me maybe like 2 months to be like, oh, this is Bonnie. But for a while, I was just like, wow, this is just such an amazing individual that's doing incredible things for the planet. And then I connected the dots to the, Harry Potter universe.
Yeah. That's a good way around the backwards way. That's good.
But so a little bit about me. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri in the Midwest. And then I went to school in Orange County, California. And then I was studying biology and I just realized like, I like the classes with the trees, so I think I need to mix this up a little bit. So I started studying environmental science and policy, like half science, half policy, and I just really enjoyed the major. During that time, I was kind of dabbling in intersectional feminism and learning about that. And then there was probably like the first kind of sort of Black Lives Matter movement in 2014. Because of a shooting in my hometown of Ferguson. So all of those things were happening at the same time. And I think that made me really realize the connections between social justice and environmentalism. And over time, I worked at Patagonia, the sustainable apparel company, for about 2 years. I loved it. And then during the pandemic, I had a little bit more time on my hands and I just wanted to get more involved in environmental activism, especially because of the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. I made a graphic environmentalist for Black Lives Matter really quickly in Canva because I have like no graphic design skills at all. And then I also included my definition of intersectional environmentalism, which is a type of environmentalism that advocates for the protection of people and the planet. And that kind of had a moment online and I just realized like this could be a platform and I would love for this to be like a movement and not just a moment. So a couple of friends and I just decided to start the platform and just kind of get going on this grassroots effort. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, congratulations on beginning that. I'm sure sometimes I think things can happen that feel like so fast that you don't know whether to sort of like know if it's sort of real and tangible or if it's fleeting. And I think that's really what's happened so much with, like you say, moments becoming movements, you know, rather than it just being a moment of this one post. You've obviously, you know, pushed through and pushed past to make it more than that. And you've obviously brought in a really great group of people to do it with and to be on the council that also obviously represent the intersection of different kind of people from different backgrounds, communities, ethnicities to come on and kind of share their voice. Is there, I guess, a mission that you have with your platform? Like, what's your kind of, I mean, end goal is obviously like a big thing, and I'm sure there's many layers, but are there things that you sort of are doing because someone else, often things will happen because someone else isn't doing it, so you're like, well, I'm gonna have to do it then. Is it working with, is it changing people's minds, perspectives around environmentalism? Is it changing maybe kind of like corporations, companies that are in the outdoor space? Like what are the layers that you're working at?
I think a little bit of everything, but I know I can't do everything, so I'm trying to narrow in on stuff and kind of allocate stuff out. I think coming from the sustainable apparel industry, my mind is kind of wired there of like, okay, we've got fair trade certification, B Corp, 1% for the planet, all these incredible certifications, but there aren't a lot of metrics for internal diversity and inclusion or intersectionality. So I would love to help tackle that with sustainable brands to be even more sustainable and intersectional and have people of color, people in the LGBTQ plus community and disabled community at different points of leadership, because I think that's super important. But as IE, intersectional environmentalist, is growing, I'm just seeing like, wow, there's so much that we can do. And I think the immediate need that I want to address is just making people feel seen and heard and validated, because I know how I felt as a Black woman in this space sometimes. And I know it goes beyond just race. I want to explore gender and sexuality and religion and culture and all of these things and how they intersect with someone's experience in the world, whether that be privileges or prejudices. And I think right now we just, with our content, we want to be as representative as possible and make sure people feel very just validated in this movement. And then we'll go from there. Who knows? We might be a lobbying body. We might do some other cool stuff. But right now we just want people to know that we see you. We want to uplift your work that's already being done. We want to support you. And it's a very grassroots effort. Like, we have individual people building our pages and helping out with content. And it's just, it's so, so fun. And I'm so appreciative of you being like on it from the get-go.
And I saw you build it and I was like, okay, here it is. This is the one, this is the platform. I think as well, what I've loved about, you know, what you've been posting so far is that you've been really transparent and vulnerable in terms of making sure that the statements you're making also feel like people aren't being left out by those statements. And I think that's so important. I think for so long, you know, we've been taught this kind of system and belief system that we need to sort of like look like we always know what we're doing and like be really confident and strong, rather than showing imperfection, showing vulnerability, and showing where like we're constantly evolving. And I think that's why I find sometimes there's been so many times where I just have been so scared to talk about anything for fear of getting it wrong. But actually, I think what I've so learned in these last few months is that you kind of have to make those mistakes and trip up and be vulnerable. And I think you've shown that in the posts you've been doing. And I'm sure the beauty of social media is that you can get that quick feedback from people to check.
And we want it so badly, because like I know, like, I'm kind of biased. I'm a Black woman in America, so with my perspective, I know sometimes it can be a little biased. And something that I realized really quickly, we have community pages on the website, and I helped curate a page that we called like the Black community page. And I realized like this is so US focused because I'm in the US, and I need to make sure to go beyond that and explore the Black experience, whether it's like the Afro Latinx experience or different experiences everywhere. And I love that our community holds us accountable and they kind of call us in. And I know that it's coming from a good place, because most people just want to feel seen and heard and validated. So sometimes I feel that defensiveness, I guess, that initial defensiveness and fragility. And then I realized like, wait, I've been given this platform where people are finally hearing my voice. So if I can do something to make other people's voices heard, then I want to do that. And it's awesome to see that you use your platform in like similar ways. And I find people through you as well, because you do a really great job of like uplifting people. For example, Kevin, if you know Kevin on our council, Kevin
Yeah.
J. Patel. Yeah, love him. He's great.
Yeah, we met in a sustainability class at UCLA. He was there like in 2 of the lessons, and we met there. So yeah, I think it's, you know, and so much of the time, often friendships and relationships can like be found through social media, and that was, for instance, with Kevin, that was actually, you know, in person. But I think like how you're expressing, you know, you have your unique lens obviously on the world, as we all do. And I think what sometimes is difficult is, I'm sure there's lots of people from all over the world on this conversation, is that there's like so many parts of change. There's obviously like greater, bigger societal kind of education, and liberating from systems that clearly we're not happy in. And then there's the more specific, focused policy kind of things, as you're saying, maybe your platform will develop into that. In your studies, did you learn a lot about, I mean, essentially until policy is there, like so much of the planet and ourselves can't be protected. And do you find, how do you basically intersect, I guess, policy kind of concentration and work on that, and just like overall kind of character shifting, changing perspectives?
Yeah, I think something that I really loved about my major is that like it was an environmental science and policy major. So, and then in addition to that, I was also a comparative world religions minor. So there was just a lot of intersectionality happening.
Yeah.
Just like a lot. But yeah, so your question is like, how do we, that was a good question. Can you rephrase
Yeah,
it?
sure. I guess, how do we sort of balance our work in pushing policy and sort of working alongside and believing in democracy, essentially, and just like our day-to-day habitual changes, whether that's like around environmental things or just around our like perspectives of like trying to understand other people's stories and journeys?
I think a good place to start is just like we were talking about earlier, progress is better than perfection. There are so many issues, and when you think about intersectionality and all the different parts of our identities, it can get really complicated. And I hope people know that like I'm not suggesting that because sometimes when I feel overwhelmed, then I almost feel stifled to even take any action at all, because I'm like, oh, I want to say the right thing. I want to do the right thing. I always want to vote the right way. I want to, you know, do this and be this perfect intersectional being and advocate for all people. But I think a good place to start, and this probably isn't answering your question completely, is just to like realize our humility, I guess, in different ways, like realizing that our humanity means that we are imperfect, and those imperfections can actually help, you know, accomplish the goals that we'd like to accomplish. So just starting from there and just realizing like, okay, I don't have to be perfect, but yeah, I can still make incredible change. And yeah,
and I think what comes with that is, I think also feel like understanding maybe where your strengths lie as an individual. I think often, you know, leadership is spoken about so much, but I find that not everyone wants to be a leader, and you know, we all need to collaborate and use our skill set or interests or kind of experiences to sort of form more collaborative sort of like group effort work. And I think often, even though I was obviously catapulted into this situation of kind of influence through my work in Harry Potter, in my own kind of day-to-day quiet life, I'm quite a shy person. I don't really like confrontation or like speaking in, you know, big spaces. You find yourself in these positions, and I kind of feel that's probably the same as you're saying with you. And it's checking in with those moments of being like, I've been given this platform and using it in an authentic way that speaks to me, but also knowing that like I don't necessarily need to be, you know, a leader. And when people ask for, I guess, guidance or help or like thought on inspiration on how to get involved, how to become an advocate, how to become an activist, I think it's really important to know that like there's so many different versions of that, and not having to play into this role of something, because I think and I'm sure with your platform and your council members, everyone's giving quite different types of personality that makes it so effective.
And it's so beautiful, and like I can't even begin to understand the amount of attention that you have and have had. But it was very strange for me and very beautiful in the same way. But I think you were following me when I had 13,000 followers, and then very suddenly it grew to like over 100,000 in the course of 3 weeks. And then people were saying like, guide this movement, like lead us.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm like kind of shy, kind of awkward, but here I am. Like, if I'm given this platform, then I want to use it. But I found myself getting burnt out, and it's only been like going on 2 months of kind of this new platform. I found myself wanting to do a lot for everyone. And then I realized, okay, this is why we have the Intersectional Environmentalist Council of over 20 people that have really incredible opinions. And like you were saying, like my approach, I'm not going to let my ego get in the way and say like my approach is the best approach, because I think it takes all of us. And even if some people are a little bit more direct than I am and like thrive in confrontation, like that really complements like me, because I might not necessarily love confrontation, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to happen. And I think being able to recognize our own strengths is so beautiful, because some people want to hold the megaphone. That's not me. I'm a writer for a reason. I'm behind a screen and the protection of my own home, and like, you know, I'll step outside of my house sometimes. But I mean, I think everyone matters so much. And even if that's like connecting with their family members and talking to them about the climate crisis, or also talking about how communities of color might be disproportionately impacted, and really advocating for that in environmental science classes and spaces, like all of those different things really make a difference. And I hope people know that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you can have so many conversations at so many scales, whether that's with a friend around a dinner table or at a rally or online. There's just so many different scales of conversation that are all needed.
Exactly.
And so just backing up a little bit, I guess, talking about, I guess, why you sort of like needed to create intersectional environmentalist platform, or also just make that statement. I mean, on one specific thing right now, California's, there's a thing that might pass, which basically means that oil drilling facilities will need to have a certain amount of distance between homes and their like building and construction, because so we'll see how that goes. But so for instance, to give a bit of a backstory, obviously it's very proven through research and health research that people that live around things like drilling, oil drilling facilities are at a higher risk of different health issues, whether that's asthma, cancer, all different respiratory things as well. And obviously, well, not obviously, unfortunately, most of these facilities are built around communities of color, Black and brown communities, and lower income communities. For me, you know, I remember coming to LA for the first time. I mean, you see these, when you come out of LAX airport, you can just see all of these huge crane looking things. And I remember just thinking, you know, what are those? And it's, you know, I feel it's taken me almost too long to learn and understand what they are and how disproportionately they affect people and where they're built. And that is, to me, like a very clear visual understanding of why and how the climate crisis, environmental issues are already disproportionately affecting people. And I think often what's hard about communicating things, it can be very like out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people. I think I found that very much talking about single-use plastics and ocean plastics, you know, it's like, oh, this like distant land far away in the ocean that's not like affecting me right now today. So would you mind sharing a little bit about sort of, I guess how we change that as policy, or maybe just your thoughts on that, and sort of like the thoughts on the kind of injustice around that and the social justice around that.
Yeah, I think you hit it like right on the head, or whatever that phrase is, the nail on the head. Thanks. But yeah, I think when things are out of sight, out of mind, it's really easy not to pay attention to it. And I think all of us have privileges in some ways in different parts of our identities. And I can't say that I'm perfect. I'm sure there are things that I have like not given my full attention to because I didn't recognize it. But I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of people who are low income or BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, are disproportionately exposed to almost all of the environmental hazards. Like, I feel like it would be one thing if it was like, okay, you know, poor air quality, this is the only one where some disproportionate data lies. But then when you're looking at access to green space, air quality, water quality, proximity to toxic waste, landfills, and it goes on and on and on. And even when you're looking at, like, I've been trying to stop saying small island nations and instead say large ocean communities, because that just
that's good. Yeah, that's true.
But even those, like, they are going to be impacted by sea level rise in a way that is so disproportionate for a crisis that they didn't even cause. So when I'm looking at it on all those different metrics and all the data, and I've been studying it, I just realized, like, okay, if this isn't a case for intersectionality, I don't know what is, because it's in the data. It's been in the data for a long time. And I think as environmentalists, we're in this very pivotal moment of saying, do we want to proceed, and do we want to acknowledge the history of how environmental policies have, unfortunately, even if environmentalists are nice, well-intentioned people, as we said, nice, well-intentioned people can sometimes do bad things, and can do bad things sometimes because of privilege. So I think we're at this moment in history where we're saying, like, we need to address this. We need to address this. When we talk about conservation, when we talk about, you know, recycling, we could take a deeper dive and we can look at, okay, where is our recycling trash going to? You know, are we shipping this to other countries that are primarily like Black and brown? Or when we're talking about conservation and saving endangered species, we can think about, okay, which communities maybe are impacted by this, that are living alongside of the endangered salmon that we're talking about. And just take it one step further and look at the people component, and just remember that people are a part of this great big ecosystem. So whenever someone doesn't understand the people component in environmentalism, just remembering, like, we are animals, we are species, some of us are endangered. And I think the more we phrase it that way, the more people will be able to understand, like, the need for intersectionality. Because for me, yeah, the data's been there. And as a Black environmentalist, like, I can't really separate my identities, you know? So when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, I knew that it was also an environmental movement, because I knew all of that data. So I just hope with intersectional environmentalists, we can make the case for that a little bit easier, and just give people a bunch of resources just to say, like, here, there you go. Like, here it is. You don't even have to do, like, a super deep dive, but a lot of people are just begging to be heard right now. And I think that should be immediately addressed in the environmental community.
Yeah, and as you say, I think your website outlines that. Obviously, you have different kind of, at the moment, different topics that you can go into and find different kind of good articles written about each of those things, which is good. And I think, like you're saying, I think there's a case, you know, there's a case to, you know, here you can quite, well, I have definitely spoken and been with people who have been directly affected, and just in conversation. I did Jane Fonda did one of her Fire Drill Fridays kind of around this. Yeah, and so with that, you know, the more you begin to actually have firsthand conversations or hear stories of people who have been directly affected by, for instance, living next to a drilling site, I think it all becomes very real and very different. I think in terms of, like, when you look at crisis, I think obviously we're literally in the middle of a whole another crisis right now of our health through COVID. And I think the minute you begin to know of someone firsthand who's been affected by it, the rawness and realness of the situation becomes a lot more potent and real. And I think it's similar when you look at the climate crisis. If you kind of knew someone firsthand that was either displaced because of, you know, environmental issues, or their health was, like, really affected by it, I think our visceral reaction to it would be different. So I think that's what's the beauty of storytelling through social media and all these different things, is that you can hopefully for a moment just be able to empathize and understand someone else's situation. And I know, you know, I'm sure you find that with what's enjoyable about writing is you can communicate that and get that across.
I really love the council that we have, and even beyond that, for intersectional environmentalists, like, even our community leads, like, if someone sends us a pitch and they're like, hey, I really want to write about like spirituality and like, you know, multicultural identity. We're like, yes, we would love that. We would love that on our platform, because the more stories we can share with the people who are following us, like you said, they'll just go, oh, maybe I didn't know someone before, but maybe this is a perspective I should be considering.
Yeah.
So I think what we want to do, especially as we transition into like other media forms, which I'm really excited about, you know, hopefully some short form and long form media, we want to do our best to introduce our following to our council members and to a lot of the environmental activists who are people of color or part of the LGBT plus community or disabled community, so they can say, oh, okay, I know that person. Because beforehand, they might not know someone who's like a Latinx environmental activist, but they might be able to say, oh, okay, I actually know Jessie Galvez, who is like a Latinx non-binary environmental science student and activist, and I can learn from this very, you know, cool perspective. And we want people to know the people, so they can, when they're thinking about policies, they can say, oh, I know someone, so let me make sure I can advocate for them. And it's been a really beautiful thing to see. And of course, there's a lot of nuances and conversations and disagreements, but we're doing our best just to really show the people who have been there in the environmental movement for a long time, and just challenge people to take it a step further and see those different perspectives.
Yeah, I think it comes from both either people needing or wanting to see someone that they can see themselves in and be inspired by that person because they feel represented, and they're like, oh, I could be that, and I can, you know, there's space for me here, and I, you know, have this platform to show up in. And I think for so long people have felt so disempowered by the small actions making impact, and I think that's what's exciting about this time through all the different movements. I mean, even just on like the fact that we're kind of isolated at home, knowing that like the choices we make are actually affecting people. So this kind of interconnectedness of everything, and that idea that we are all coexisting in the same airspace, you know, obviously things can be different, but at the same time, I think it's been an interesting just empowerment of individual choice. And obviously, you know, coming up to an election here in this country, again, it's this huge kind of impact of like your vote really mattering. And I think it's an important time for people to feel that way.
And I guess with intersectionality, sorry to cut in there, but I hope with intersectionality, like, we can make the case to build an even stronger, you know, collective to hopefully, I'm not going to name anyone specifically, but dismantle unjust systems and unjust leaders and take down those systems. Because I think with intersectionality, we can see other people as allies, like intersectional environmentalists. Like, I would love to work alongside of Greenpeace and Sierra Club and like all of these incredible other organizations, and work alongside like Sunrise. We don't want to compete, but we want to see all of our similarities and differences, and hopefully build a stronger coalition that's more diverse, and just kind of support each other and keep each other accountable. And I think that's going to be really incredible when it comes to, you know, environmental policies. If we can all mobilize together, I think we can really just do a lot of really cool things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think seeing power in like a different way, I think for so long, power has been like basically just a form of kind of oppression, rather than power being a form of like empowerment. And this idea that like we're all better collectively using our resources, or like each nonprofit and organization obviously has all the money that they're putting into their own research projects. Whereas if that's like pulled together and used together, obviously bigger, greater things can happen at like a faster level. And I think what's obviously been very interesting in these past few months is different people, whether that is organizations like Sierra Club just now, or whether that's, you know, corporations, you know, realizing and calling themselves out for either the history that their organization was built on, or behavior that's happened within their company walls. How do you think, I think a big thing which is exciting about this time, but obviously kind of there's a nervousness to make sure that these bold statements and these kind of calling out of people is actually seen through, so people and these companies actually act on that, rather than making kind of statements of kind of being an ally essentially. And how do we kind of hold people continually kind of accountable? And I think a big thing as well is not only the representation, say in brands, you know, making sure that their photo shoots and Instagrams are completely diverse and, you know, actively anti-racist, how do you make sure big roles, leadership roles in companies are reflecting that too? Because I think it can't just be like the facade of a company or an organization.
I think people can sniff through performative allyship pretty quickly now, which is why I like love Gen Z. They're just so, I don't know, they're like wired differently. Like I'm 25, so like Gen Z adjacent, but I'm like, you all are so cool. You can just sniff through all the social.
I know, I have faith for when they're in positions of power. I'm like, okay, we'll be good then. We just have to wait maybe like 10 years.
But yeah, I think something that we're doing at Intersectional Environmentalists, we're working on developing a business accountability program, so we can have metrics to keep businesses accountable for both sustainability metrics and also like social justice metrics internally and externally. And I think something that's kind of like, it's not funny, but it's kind of funny to me because I've like been in some of these organizations, is like whenever I see a campaign come out that's a little tone deaf, sometimes I'm always just, as a previous marketing and communications person, I was like, was there any Black person there?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Just like, because some things are pretty simple, like having diversity of thought, having diversity of culture, and all these different things will really help messaging actually be what these companies want the messaging to be. So if they're writing a message about, you know, Black Lives Matter movement or environmental racism, like when crafting that message, make sure you have people present. And if you don't have people present, it might even be worth like consulting, you know, paying, because compensation is really important, but like compensating a consulting agency or something just to make sure, like do that extra step. And I think it's people, they have to kind of remove themselves from it, and that I know everything, or I'm so woke I can't make a mistake, you know, and just realizing, humbling themselves. Similarly to the Sierra Club, I was for that. I love the Sierra Club, everything that they just did in terms of, you know, confronting their racist history, and I hope they stick to it, because I've seen people praise them so heavily, and I wish other companies would know and realize and take that as a case study and as an example, that the people want accountability. We're not saying that people have to be imperfect, but we want them to recognize when they have been imperfect, because one, that makes them more relatable, and two, it makes it seem genuine, and that they aren't just like woke washing or social justice washing or, you know, greenwashing. So one, I think just having people reflected in the organization, so many things would change, and then creating like a healthy environment for those people, especially if they're trying to recruit, you know, under amplified groups of people, and say, you know, maybe they recruit like one Black girl and they're like the only Black girl for a long time, like hopefully having some resources or something available so they can feel safe there. And then I think people will stay and really, you know, feel confident to be able to speak up and maybe say, okay, maybe not messaging this way, maybe we can change it a little bit this way, and making people feel empowered by giving them a seat at the table, and creative and any external communications, especially if those external communications have to do with their culture and livelihood, and just taking that step back and realizing like, okay, we don't know everything, so how can we like have a diverse coalition of people to hopefully get things right more often. Like it's not going to be perfect, but I think people really just appreciate that accountability.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it's important, as you're saying, like not only become like the singular token person who then has to in a company give your opinion on everything, like you're this one source of everything, because I think that you then, as you say, don't feel safe, or you know, you feel ostracized and alienated and marginalized still within your company. And as you're saying, it's a job, whether it's, you know, you're hiring someone with a consultancy fee or they're an actual employee. It's not something you just kind of ask for free, basically, to get that person. Yeah, can you just let us know what you think? You know?
No.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really important thing, I think. And you obviously had spoken about that recently, just in terms of like, when is it time to pay up? And it's, you know, it's always time if you're using that person's time, and this kind of like collaboration needing to be very solid and very real, because, you know, people's time and experience, I don't know, isn't to kind of be used to then sell more product, essentially. Yeah. And I guess another thing, I guess for me, I always think that you know, there's so many situations that everyone's coming at their lives in a completely different sort of journey and path. And I always think that sort of like high school, elementary education, all these spaces are kind of slightly more neutral spaces that you can formulate sort of good kind of education, understanding, personality? Is there ever going to be a moment in your platform or group that looks at education, whether or not that's actually looking at formally making sure things are part of curriculums, or maybe just additional organizations that will go into schools to offer kind of classes? I mean, I always think that if we can get it into curriculums, these things, it can massively change so many people's kind of outlooks.
Absolutely, like 110%. There was this lovely girl, I don't remember her name, but she messaged the Intersectional Environmentalist account. She's a high schooler, and she's like, I want to help you make sure that this is relevant to high schoolers, and I want to help mobilize high schoolers. So we're going to, hire her and pay her for her emotional labor to hopefully like develop some sort of program for high schoolers, And I think that's just one first step. Like, we would love to have clubs in high schools and middle schools and things like that, but we really do think it's important to change curriculums. So with this business accountability program, that's going to take a lot of work. We have a lot of experts and people to put that together. And then after that, we want to try to find ways to adopt it for other curriculums. And then we've had a lot of teachers and educators that are using our website to help develop their curriculum. But we want to find ways to, advocate for this a little bit more. Hopefully we can start like speaking at different schools and things like that. But we want to do what we can, especially the younger, the better, I think, kind of just instilling principles of environmentalism and also intersectionality at a younger age. So then it gives me chills just to think, like, if that happens, the future is going to be so amazing, so diverse, so much better for people on the planet. So yes, absolutely. And we just are so appreciative of our younger supporters, and just like I said, Gen Z, they're something else. They're just like a different breed. They're so amazing and just so ready to do this work. So
yeah, and I think what's so interesting about, if you capture children's kind of imaginations and thoughts when they're really evolving and they're so open to concepts and ideas, like the ego and the kind of societal systems are less in place, and they're not questioning or kind of not believing in things. There's this kind of imagination that's there, and also they naturally go home to their sort of home environment, their guardian, their parent, whoever that might be, and share what they've learned in a really kind of like open way that can often, from my experience from Harry Potter, I obviously will meet or speak to a lot of parents because it would have, so affected their child's life. And that they have always, like, from that experience, the parent is learning alongside the child in this experience. So I think it can ripple outwards quite quickly and effectively.
I completely agree. Like, if we can plant that seed in children, and like you said, their parents might be more likely to listen to them, and they'll see, oh, my kid really cares about both people on the planet, and they're learning about something called intersectional theory. This is so cool. Like, how can I implement this into my lives? And I think that's such a great approach. And that quote, "Children are the future." I know that's a song. Like, I believe the children are the future, but it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, definitely. And I think things stay with you. I know that there are certain things that I've relearned as a child that have genuinely stayed with me as an outlook, and and then other things like figuring out later on things that you don't wish to have anymore. I think that's what's interesting about the time we're in. Just because we catch ourselves on things that we realize were maybe like societal things that we grew up around, doesn't mean to say we can't like unlearn those ideas or unlearn those habits. And I think that's what's interesting about now. It's like, I don't know, just the amount of times that I find myself constantly catching myself and like this slow motion of being like, oh, I believe that, or I thought that because of my privilege, my kind of situation, my access to things. And you can kind of literally on a daily to day sort of see things that maybe before you just took for kind of like, oh, that's beyond my control kind of thing.
No, absolutely. Like, even my early entry into environmentalism, like, I realized how privileged I was, because when I was learning about it, I was shaming everyone. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I was probably screaming at people online, just like, you're terrible, you don't want to save the planet. Like, I was And it's because like when you first learn about the complexities of the climate crisis, like that will fire you up.
Yeah, you'll
But
be angry, very angry. Yeah.
you should be angry, you know?
Yeah.
But I just remember like, oh, yikes. Like that probably wasn't the best approach because I wasn't coming from a place like of compassion or realizing like, oh, how was I before I learned this information? So I think moving forward, I try to speak to people as though I were speaking to my younger self before I came to learn about the climate crisis, and just making sure that I lead with compassion. Because if before I learned about the climate crisis and everything, someone was just like screaming at me, like maybe I would listen, but part of myself, like I might just feel bad and I might feel like excluded from the conversation. And like I didn't know all the nuances before. I had very black and white like thinking of like, oh, no plastic straws at all. And I didn't think about people who might have disabilities where they might need to use those sorts of straws, or we can innovate like another plant-based type plastic that they can use. But I didn't think about that. Or with plastic water bottles, I didn't think about like, oh, this is how some people have access to clean water. So when I'm speaking in those absolutes now, I try to be a little bit better. But yeah, that was just a little yikes moment thinking about my younger self, and just, you know, it's okay to unlearn certain things because none of us are perfect, especially environmentalists. And I hope people know the importance of unlearning. Like along with learning, there's a lot of unlearning that happens, and you know, it's just an important part of the process, and no shame in that.
Yeah, and also sometimes seeing where maybe doubt comes in, being like, oh, I don't like that's too impossible to make a change around. And I think, you know, if there is enough need for it and desire for it, also there is kind of the possibilities of reimagining systems, or like you're saying, if you're taking something away, before you take that away because it's bad, like whether it's the plastic straw, whether it's the plastic water bottle, how and what infrastructure needs to sort of come in simultaneously. We can't just like remove, you know, something needs to come in to then feel supported, so that we're not kind of, you know, missing out on huge populations and groups that rely maybe on that one thing, whether it's clean water or the access to drink something. And I think brings, as we were kind of saying a little bit about the beginning, but this idea that, you know, there's no kind of wrong or right way to come at these things. So I'd love to just leave everyone with, I guess, a little thought on that, just in terms of like how we can show up, I guess, in like a global way and an individual way, and know that like it's not time just if you want to be more environmentally friendly or lower impact. It doesn't mean kind of like getting rid of everything in your house and starting again on new ideas, and instead like meeting yourself where you're at, I guess. And I think that's really important to kind of come at it with like a gentle way. Otherwise you can be paralyzed and just not want to do anything. There's definitely days where I'm like, I just don't want to read anything bad or do anything that's
like I love mason jars, but like it's okay if you don't have like all the mason jars and glass Tupperware right away. Like that doesn't disqualify anyone from being an environmentalist. And I totally agree with that. Like when I first started studying environmental science, I was almost paralyzed into silence and like inaction, because it just felt so big. So just take it one day at a time and know that it doesn't disqualify you if you're not perfect. So yeah,
for sure. And I would also urge everyone to go and follow Leah, a Green Girl Leah, and Intersectional Environmentalist, her platform. And as I said, there's great links that you've put together through topics in terms like around the things we've been talking about, whether it's education or agriculture or waste or different things like that. So you can check those things out. And thank you so much for coming on to discuss. I could like chat for hours, but I'm sure this is probably enough time for people. But yeah, thank you again. And I hope to just keep following and watching everything you're doing.
Thanks for your support. And hopefully I'll talk to you soon. Bye,
yeah,
everyone.
for sure. Bye, thanks everyone.
Bye.